Alright, my last video in the 1960s. This is the rise and the falls of the counterculture. Alright, the 1960s hippie movement is so impactful in changing music and in changing, gosh, clothing and attitudes and all these different things. And it's so impactful today. And this is going to kind of be the rise of that and ultimately the fall. It really only lasts the 60s. There were still some remnants in the 70s, but by 1969 it has basically died out, and we're going to talk about why. Okay? Now, the first thing is generally in politics, okay, the right, as we call it, is going to be kind of more Republican and conservative, whereas the left will be liberal and wanting to change. There is a new left movement. Right? The new left movement is completely radical. They want to change things. They don't feel the government is working for them. A lot of ideas of promoting socialism would be on the left, etc. And so we have a lot of these new left groups popping in, wanting to change the government and change the way that things happened. Okay? The biggest New Left movement was Students for a Democratic Society, or SDS. Now, they had two interesting slogans. The first one you see there, there's a change going to come. The other slogan was, don't trust anybody over 30. And so these are students, and they're basically feel like their democratic voice is not being heard, and so they want to change things. They want to try and promote a different thing. Namely here, the big thing they're going to talk about is anti-war, okay? All these groups are anti-war. So, now the other big event they have is they actually occupied, remember that term from the Native Americans? The University of Columbia, which is an Ivy League school. They go and basically kick the people out, not by force. They didn't have guns, but they basically overtook it, and the people ran away. And they said, hey, we took this fairly easily. All right? Now, the leader of this SDS was a man named Tom Hayden, and Tom Hayden was asked to give a statement on what SDS wanted. And so he will issue the Port Huron Statement. All right? The Port Huron Statement criticized political system of the United States, failing to achieve international peace. It critiqued Cold War policy, the threat of nuclear war, and of course the arms race, building up these nuclear arsenals. In domestic matters, it criticized racial discrimination, economic inequality, big businesses, trade unions, and political parties. In short, everything we have kind of talked about and seen maybe a negative connotation to, they say we have to eliminate, okay? So it sounds good in quality, but are you going to get all that changed? Probably not. That's a big order, okay? But the point is, people are now voicing their opinion, and they're allowed to do that going forward. Now, right there, they're going to inspire another movement, and this one was in California at the University of California, Berkeley. There was a paper shut down for critiquing the war, and so these people said, well, who are you to tell us what we can write about the war? And so they began what is called the free speech movement, okay? Now, the free speech movement goes back to we should be allowed to voice our displeasure with the war without being concerned about you. The leader of the free speech movement is a man named Mario Savio. Now, famously, Mario Savio gave a lot of really inspirational speeches, but more recently, a band named Linkin Park used a part of his speech in the beginning of a song of Wretches and Kings. The short, and I'm paraphrasing what he says, is there comes a point when you're in this machine and you get tired of the machine and you hate the machine and it becomes so odious and it makes you so sick at heart and you don't want to take part. You don't want to passively take part, and so you put your body upon the gears and upon the levers and upon all the apparatuses, and you've got to make it stop. And it's a very powerful speech. Look up the song and maybe listen to the beginning only and see how impactful Mario Savio was. Now, the free speech movement then starts popping up in all these universities. So we have SDS changing things there and the free speech movement popping up. And once that does, things really start going crazy. okay? Uh, we have the birth of what are called um, the counterculture. Now, the culture is like a clock, right? You're moving one way consistently. Counterculture means you're moving the exact opposite way of way you were before. And so the counterculture movement are children, I wouldn't say children, college students, okay? And they are going to reject everything their parents has told them. For example, they're going to reject the idea of not using drugs. Drugs have been prevalent, and they're going to practice the use of mind-altering drugs. They're going to reject the idea of monogamous or one-person relationship. They're going to reject the idea of going and getting a job to make money. They're going to live in nature. They're going to reject the idea of cars, a lot of them, gasoline, and things like that. Now, there is a difference here, and my mother was one of these, so I have to make this distinction. My mother was an example of a flower child, but there's also hippies. Hippies were the ones who used the drugs. Flower children just kind of went for it for the music. They were kind of the hipsters, if you know what that term is. But nonetheless, and these people had different ways of making themselves unique in their dress. Number one, they had the bell-bottom jeans, which were kind of closer to the thigh, and then they kind of flared out at the feet. Number two, the open-toed sandals really became a popular thing. Number three, the boys wore their hair long. And lastly, their music, guys. They wore a lot of earth tone colors, and their music was just completely radical and different from anything that anybody had ever heard. Now, as the song goes, if you're going to San Francisco was the counterculture mecca. It's where everybody went, and the place where they were generally kind of concentrated was an area of San Francisco known as the Haight-Ashbury district. And it was said there you could go and you can kind of start your life. You would find someone who was a group of people you liked, and you would set off to live in a commune. Now, a commune is a communist term, a socialist term. Everyone there works for the benefit of all the people in the commune, and they share everything. So everyone would go work in the field for this, and you would come back, and everybody would kind of feast. And so they're rejecting the idea of working to make money. They're working to kind of survive, okay? Seems very Amish or something like that, but it's a commune. Everybody's working for the benefit of the group. Now, a man comes along, all right? And this man was actually first hired by the U.S. government to try to change prisoners. And so he developed a drug. And I'll show you some of the videos he played for these people. It's weird. The name of this drug was LSD, or acid. And Timothy Leary's whole goal was to reprogram their brains so they wouldn't keep making these mistakes. Problem is, it didn't work, okay? Now, Timothy Leary has kind of set off this thing, and he begins to promote the idea that this thing can change your brain, your way of thinking. One band really heard this and got a hold of it. There has been allusions that the song that I have for you here, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, the initials spell out LSD. The Beatles, however, deny that claim, but you can make that up for yourself. The Beatles are going to become associated with Timothy Leary. They're going to become participants in LSD, and for this reason, LSD becomes mainstream. Now, the other thing about Timothy Leary, just real quickly, is he gave us a motto of this counterculture. He said, turn on, tune in, drop out. Turn on to what these people were doing. Tune in your mind and your senses to everything going on, and drop out of society, drop out of conventional norms. And a lot of college students took him up on this. That's kind of the movement there as we got to it. Now, I need to talk about Alice's Restaurant. I'm going to talk about this. Arlo Guthrie visited a place called Alice's Restaurant, and this is a satirical view on the counterculture. Just some people weren't in it to actually change, my mother being one of them. They just wanted to kind of fit into what was being cool. And so he said, why are we even doing this? You're just trying to be there uh, to say that it was the cool spot, like Alice's Restaurant. This is the first real protest song, and it kind of inspires other people to continue. Okay? Now, all of this counterculture and hippie angst culminates in 1969, as we call it, the Summer of Love, for 3 days in a place in uptown New York, or upstate New York. That's called Woodstock. Now, Woodstock was an arts and music festival, and it lasted 3 days, and everyone just really enjoyed it, and it was kind of highlighting everything the counterculture was about: free love and music and art and nature and rejecting society, all these things. This is the high point. Everything after this falls, and it falls immensely really quickly, because in 1969 as well, we get the idea of the Manson family and who the Manson family was. Now, the Manson family was a commune. Nothing wrong with that. The leader of this commune was a man named Charles Manson, and Charles Manson actually used LSD to kind of get these people to buy into a sense that he was Jesus Christ. Okay? So Charles Manson, one day on one of these trips that he's doing with LSD, is listening to a Beatles record entitled Helter Skelter, which, if you haven't heard the song, is really weird, not a typical Beatles song. In the end, Ringo actually played so hard he actually yells on the record, "I got blisters on my fingers." Sorry, Ringo, that was my voice. Don't judge me. But he is inspired here, and he thinks Helter Skelter is calling for a race war. So when it doesn't come, in the time that he had promised these people, he sends the Manson family out, as they were called, to commit some atrocities to start a race war. And they kill an actress and her unborn baby. In total, they kill 6 people that we know of. There could have potentially been more. Ultimately, using the blood of some of the victims to write out pig and things like that, thinking this would start a race war. Well, in actuality, it got them arrested, and they've been in prison. Now, why did they not receive the death penalty for this? California actually is one of the first really liberal states to actually ban the death penalty, so they got life in prison. Charles Manson, however, is still alive. The media trial of this court case was crazy. The women followers at one point even shaved their head. They dressed up like schoolgirls. I mean, it was chaotic. Manson shaved a swastika with a knife into his head, which you can still see scars of today, if you see his picture. Now, what has Manson been up to recently? He actually runs a website from jail. He has gotten married, and there's all kinds of things with that. But this is the down point of the counterculture, because they said, is the drug use acid, is it really a good thing? Are these communes really good, or are they creating this cult mentality that we've seen in other places? And so from this point on, a lot of people begin to push away, and the 70s happen, and we have disco. Anyway, but that's it for the 1960s protest movement. I will cover some more when I get to the African American civil rights, but that's a whole unit, all right? Next one is about Nixon, guys. That's a fun one.